Believe it or not, it's been nearly 3 seasons since Boise State has captured the Mountain West Conference Championship. And after starting the season at 2-2, it appeared the drought might continue. But the bye week came at the right time, and the Broncos have won 5 straight and are in the driver's seat with 3 to play. We'll find out what their chances are for this week in Fort Collins and for the rest of the season as we go one-on-one with BJ Rains, Boise State beat writer for the Idaho Press Tribune, covering all things for Boise State football and basketball on the OFN Meeting Room with Greg DePalma. All right, it's November 9th, 2017. I'm Greg DePalma. Thanks for tuning into the OFN Meeting Room as we talk Boise State football with BJ Rains. BJ, thanks to you for talking to us today about Boise State football.
Hey, no problem. How you guys doing?
Doing all right. So you guys are doing a lot better. Boise State, again, they get off to a slow start this season, but things really did take off after the bye week. Was that a coincidence, or did something happen?
Well, I mean, they just, are usually good for one of those kind of clunker games a year, and it came against Virginia, and they just didn't play very well in that game, and, fell to 2-2, and I think the thing that happened was they had the bye week. The offensive line had struggled. Offensive line got better, made some changes, got some guys healthy. They had a, commitment to the running game, which really had been terrible for them the first 4 games. They started getting the running game going again, and then probably the obvious one is, the quarterback, Brett Rippon. He had been hurt early in the season, had been inconsistent. They were dealing with this 2-quarterback system and just wasn't really working or fitting in. And they got that figured out, got Rippon going. He's had a couple good games since then. They've found a way to use both these quarterbacks, and the schedule kind of lightened up a little bit too. And they've won some big road games, and they're a whole different team right now. It's a much different feeling, like you said, they're in the open from September 22nd, about midnight, to where they're feeling right now.
So really, the main thing then with Rippon is just the injury situation, because a lot was expected of him this year. There's no other reason that we could see that he hasn't played like he was last year. And you expect him to continue to play better, but you also expect to see Cozart continue to get in some reps.
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons that we probably don't have enough time for on the show,
right.
But I think part of it was, they brought back really one of their key wide receivers from last year. They lost the school's all-time leading receiver, Thomas Spurback, after last year, and he was able to make, a lot of catches that, maybe the ball wasn't perfect, and he made some amazing catches to kind of save Rippon on some throws. And they had another receiver, Chaz Anderson, that was a solid receiver, had 35 catches or something for him last year. And so he lost 2 of his top 3 receivers. And aside from Cedric Wilson, the group that he was bringing back had combined for like 17 career catches or something. So they just had a lot of inexperience at receiver. And I don't think he had a lot of trust in those other guys maybe early on. I don't think those guys, had done enough to earn it early on. And so I think he just didn't have enough weapons other than Cedric Wilson early in the season. And the offensive line played a big part of it. They were terrible early in the season. Against Troy, it was their first game. Like 4 guys were making their first career start up front, and they ended up having to play Cozart in the fourth quarter to win the game because they had to run the ball because they just couldn't protect Rippon. So I think there's a lot of things that came into play. He got a concussion against Washington State and then missed the next game against New Mexico. And then just for whatever reason, it just took some time with everything to click. But the O-line has clicked. The running game is going, which has opened up the passing game. And I think they've figured out this 2-quarterback system. They're going to keep working. I mean, there's times where they'll have 5 plays and they'll go back and forth every other play. I mean, they're literally, it's not you get a series, you get a series. It's, you get a play, and then, you get a play. So it's just, I've never seen anything like this, the way they're making it work. And they're finding a way to make it work, and it is working. And I think that both quarterbacks are kind of, figuring out how it's working and kind of what to prepare for. And certainly the last 2 games have easily been Rippon's best 2 games, and to go along with that, it's been the offense's best 2 games as well.
Yeah, and getting back to Cedric Wilson, he's definitely the top prospect, according to our lads, for the NFL draft. He's Dan Shanka's 4th-rated senior wide receiver, all over 1,100 yards receiving last year. He's got over 800 this year. So knowing all the other top receivers that you've seen come out of this program recently, how does Cedric Wilson rank and compare?
I mean, it's been phenomenal. He came in out of a junior college, Coffeyville Junior College. He's originally from Memphis. And, usually, coaches are kind of reserved and don't really hype up guys too much. But before last year, I mean, they were really just raving. And it was like, okay, if this guy's not legit, it's going to be a huge letdown because the coaches just continued to rave about him. And his very first game at Boise State last year against at Troy, he had like 6 catches for 100 yards in the very first quarter. And it was like, okay, this guy's all right. And, he put up big numbers last year, but again, he was behind Thomas Spurbeck. And so, he got his numbers, but they're even better this year. And, yeah, he's probably going to have, 1,400 yards receiving. And again, he's doing this with, a quarterback battle and where they're moving guys around, and 2 games where Rippon didn't even play really. And so he's putting up some impressive numbers despite the fact that other teams are keying on him. They know he's their number 1 receiver. They know they're going to throw him the ball, and he's still finding ways to make plays. And he's got very good ball skills. He doesn't drop many passes at all. If the ball's near him, he can go up and get it. He went up and made a 44-yard touchdown catch against Nevada where the ball was a little underthrown, but he just went up and got it and took it away from the defender for the touchdown. So he is certainly a guy that's going to play on Sundays. Wouldn't surprise me if he gets a Senior Bowl invite and some of those kind of things. But he's a very, very good player, and it's only his second year with Boise State, so we're still kind of getting to know him here in Boise. But he's a great kid, and always enjoy talking to him. And he was a high school quarterback, so he's still kind of new to the wide receiver position. He continues to get better, and he looks like he certainly has a chance to play at the next level.
And I also noticed that the team, coincidentally or not, the offense started to move a little bit better, or the running game did, when sophomore Alexander Madison really took off after the first 4 games. How did that happen? What was it in the running game? And again, he's a young kid, so what was it? Why did the light seem to turn on after the bye week for Madison?
Well, certainly, he's a guy that the first part of the season, he was coming off an injury. He hasn't used that too much of an excuse, but he didn't practice at all in the spring.
Okay.
Coming off a shoulder surgery, I believe it was, and then I think something else happened in fall camp, and he got banged up a little bit and missed some time. But again, they're trying to replace, Jeremy McNichols, who had, one of the top seasons in school history and left early and was a, 5th round pick by the Buccaneers, and so everyone just kind of assumed Madison was going to be the guy, but he just got off to a slow start. He was splitting time with a former walk-on, Ryan Wolpen, the first couple games. And it just took a while. As I said, the offensive line took them a while to get going, and I think everything just kind of clicked in that BYU game. And once he got going, that changed everything. And I think he's had 300-yard games out of 4 or something like that during the stretch there. And he's his resurgence, and I think he just said it was a mindset. He was kind of dancing around and missing some holes and stuff early in the season, and they just kind of told him, hey, you got to hit the hole and go for it, and there's no time to mess around. And his kind of, mindset of physicality and getting downhill and just, not waiting around, he gets it and goes, and he's been really impressive. He's also not bad out of the backfield catching passes either, so he's been impressive, and certainly I think it's a lot of things coming together, but certainly the running game has opened up the passing game, and whether it's Madison, the offensive line, it all kind of comes together, but he has certainly played better during this win streak, and that's kind of helped everything else.
What about the defense? Because there have been a lot of really good defenses in this program over the years. You take a look at the talent, though, and I don't know whether or not they have the talent that they used to have. But you have this kid, Van Der Esch, who leads the team with 86 tackles. Curtis Weaver, the redshirt freshman, is having a big year with 7 sacks. And Jabril Frazier has also been a key contributor. Who's the top guy? Is there a clear top guy on defense for this team? Is it possibly Weaver? You're looking at him as the future because of how young he is and what a really good season it seems like he's having?
I would say, Antonio Pierce, the former linebacker with the New York Giants.
Yep.
His son, DeAndre Pierce, is a sophomore safety.
Okay.
And he's a heck of a player. I would say in terms of NFL prospects, he's a little bit small.
Okay.
But, man, he just has that football instincts where he's moving to the side of the field before the play is snapped. And you can just tell he's from a football family. And he makes so many tackles, or breaks up passes right as the guy is catching the ball because he read the play before it even happened. And he is just got that football aptitude where he just knows the play before it's going to happen. It happens all the time. You say, okay, he's going to the right, and then sure enough, they throw it to the right. I just don't know how he does it, but I do know how he does it. He just studies film a lot, and he knows the fact that he kind of knows what he's looking for, and he's just a heck of a player. And so, you talk about the talent level. Not the problem. It's actually a great thing for Boise State, but they've got a lot of young guys. I think it's only one senior, Gabe Perez, that actually plays for the defense.
Okay.
So, the talent level there's a lot of talent, but they're young. And so, they're still a top 25 defense, I think, in total defense. and in points allowed, they're like top 30. So, I mean, they're having a pretty good season. They've held, I think, all 5 of the Mountain West teams, or at least during this 5-game winning streak, they've held teams to 14 points or less.
Yep.
And so, I mean, they're playing pretty well. And yeah, Van Der Esch is a cool story. He's a former walk-on from Riggins, Idaho, played 8-man football, and they saw something in him, and he's added like 40 pounds, and now he's just a heck of a player in the middle at linebacker for them. But Curtis Weaver's a redshirt freshman. I mentioned Pierce is a sophomore. Koa Nawahini, who has 3 picks, he's a sophomore also. Tyson Maeva, another starting linebacker, is a sophomore. I mean, they just have all across the defense. They're just loaded with sophomores and redshirt freshmen, and so they're playing pretty well this year. Probably, honestly, better than some people thought they would because all the guys they lost multiple guys the last several years to the NFL. I mean, they got 2 starters for the New York Giants, Dante Dion and Darian Thompson in the secondary. That played together at Boise State and left 2 years ago, and then last year they had Tanner Vallejo drafted, I think, 5th round by the Buffalo Bills. I mean, they're losing some guys, and then this is was going to kind of be, I don't know if rebuild is the right word, but retool, and then get these guys some experience, and next year they'd have a big year. But ahead of schedule, they're playing really, really well. And like I said, Pierce, Weaver's certainly a guy they like. Van Der Esch, Frazier, I think, is a guy because of his size that NFL teams like. But, they're all scheduled to be back next year, except for, like I said, Gabe Perez, who's like an outside linebacker. So they're it's pretty scary to think about what this group could look like a year from now.
Yeah, and then Rippon comes back next year too, so could be a big year next year for the team, for the program. A couple more things before I let you go. First of all, as far as the game this week and the rest of the way, as you said, the schedule the last few weeks may not have been as tough, but it sure is getting tough now. You got the big game for Collins, even though the Rams haven't been playing their best football lately. Air Force, and then at Fresno State. So this is a pretty interesting run. What are you expecting this week and the rest of the season?
Well, I mean, this is kind of a scenario that Boise State has been in the last couple of years. I went back and looked at it because I'm writing about it for Saturday. 2015, Boise State lost 2 of their last 3 regular season games and missed the conference championship game. Last year, they lost their last regular season game to Air Force and missed the conference championship game. And so here they are again, just needing to win 2 of their final 3 games to get to the conference championship game. It's a similar scenario to the last couple of years. So they're trying to kind of learn from those experiences, take it one game at a time, but certainly it's not easy when you look at 2 games on the road out of the 3, playing at Fresno in the final game, who's been surprisingly playing pretty well this year.
Yeah.
You look at an Air Force team who somehow has beaten Boise State 3 years in a row, and no one has beaten Boise State 3 years in a row, prior to this since like Nevada back in the 90s. So I mean, it just doesn't happen. And so they've got their number. And so, that's going to be a tough game. And certainly I think people thought the game on Saturday was going to be a little tougher at the time just because it was a game that was probably going to decide the Mountain Division. And then once Colorado State lost, particularly the last game to Wyoming, it kind of gave Boise State a little room for error here where they only need to win 2 out of 3. And even if they lose this game, they're still in control of their destiny because they'd have a tiebreaker, or they'd have a 1-game cushion still with 1 conference loss to 2. So, I think Vegas had it as like a 5-point spread or something. So it's certainly going to be a tough game. Colorado State's got the new stadium. They're debuting some new uniforms. State Pride uniforms, they're calling them. So they're going to have a big crowd. I think they're having a whiteout for this game. So they'll be fired up for this one. But Colorado State's never beaten Boise State. Boise State is 6-0 all time against Colorado State since they came into the Mountain West in 2001. And the 3 games in Fort Collins, Boise State's won by an average of like 30 points.
Wow.
So traditionally, Boise State hasn't had too much trouble in these games in Fort Collins. But I think this one is going to be a pretty tough game. And particularly with, the last couple of years, Boise State struggles. This is a game they really want to win and then have a chance to wrap up the Mountain Division crown at home on senior night against Air Force next week.
All right, and then the last thing, Brian, is the recruiting. How's the recruiting coming along? Obviously, with Peterson no longer here, this is all Brian Harson's team now. So are you seeing any major differences from Harson's recruiting efforts compared to Peterson's?
No, not really. I mean, he's still just getting his full. I think we're at the point now where almost every player was recruited by him. I think Gabe Perez was the only player that actually played for Peterson in 2013, and then he's had some injuries. But so the roster's almost full of all of his guys, and they just got a 4-star receiver from California to commit over the weekend. They're doing pretty good. I mean, they're Brett Rippon was pretty high ranked when they got him. They've got some other guys that were fairly high ranked. I mean, they're not getting, top 25 recruiting classes, but even Peterson didn't do that. So in terms of, they're traditionally keeping the top class in the Mountain West. Nothing has really changed there. They're going for the top, group of 5 class, and they're beating out some of the, Pac-12 schools for some guys. I think they go for higher guys. They don't always get them, but they do seem to bring in more, 4-star guys for visits and stuff, and they take, more home run swings. I mean, they strike out on some of them, but it does seem like I've noticed that the visitors and the guys they're interested in, are higher in terms of who they're giving themselves a chance with. And that is paying off here and there with a couple of 4-stars guys they brought in. I think I looked it up last year at this time, and they had more 4-stars in like the 3 years of Harsin than they had during the whole time that Peterson was there.
Wow. Awesome. BJ, I appreciate it. Great job. We look forward to talking to you again at least sometime before the season ends.
Yeah, anytime, guys. Glad to help. Glad to do it, and thanks a lot.
Excellent. Thanks, BJ.
No problem.
All right, that's BJ Rains. And again, BJ is covering Boise State football and basketball for the Idaho Press Tribune. And he does a great job, and he knows what's going on over there. I've never been there. It's definitely, look, I don't mind the cold weather. I think it'd be an awesome trip to go to Boise in a big game. I don't know. I mean, again, I don't think this team. I do agree. Next year's the year. They do appear to be a little bit ahead of schedule because it looked like earlier in the season that things weren't going well. Like BJ said, remember we were kind of critical of what was going on there because of the fact that they had not closed the deal the last couple of years, and then they get off to a 2-2 start, and they get blown out by Virginia, and you're just going, what's going on here, really? Is just not working out? Is there something that has gone stale at Boise? It just doesn't seem like the program that we're accustomed to under Chris Peterson. But all of a sudden, the bye week came, and Boise State is responding. The program is looking more and more reminiscent to what we're used to seeing. And now the big question is can they close the deal? We'll wait and see. Whether or not they can go ahead and get it done. They're a young team, as BJ mentioned, so it's not going to be easy, but it's there for the taking. And because Colorado State has not continued to play the type of football that they played early on in the season, including, of course, the loss last week, it's looking like Boise State's in pretty good control right now, but this is a tough schedule. Playing Colorado State on the road, playing Fresno State on the road. By the way, they could wind up playing Fresno State back-to-back because Fresno State's got a half-game lead over San Diego State. It's a 2-team race in the Western Division. Fresno's a half game up on San Diego State. But, of course, Fresno has the edge because Fresno has beaten San Diego State. So, in reality, Fresno is actually a game and a half ahead of San Diego State. So Fresno State is going to have to lose at least twice in the next 3. Here's the problem. Even though Fresno State's on the road, they're going to be at Hawaii this week. So if Fresno wants to win this division, the West, and play Boise for the championship, if Boise gets there, and it does look like, again, they've got the inside track to get there, then Fresno is going to have to beat Hawaii. And if they do that, then it's going to be awfully hard for Fresno. I mean, Fresno would then have to lose their last 2, and it could be interesting to see what happens in that final game. A lot of things can happen. I mean, who knows? It could be one of those scenarios, too, in which Boise State saying to themselves, well, if we beat Fresno, we'll play San Diego State. If we lose to Fresno, we'll play Fresno. And I know the kids aren't going to be thinking about any of that. But I don't know. You just wonder in the back of your mind if Boise's already locked in. Is there any sort of chess game being played? Is there a team that they'd rather play? Do they play some of the backups a little bit and say, hey, we want to rest some guys, make sure they're ready to go for the championship game and the bowl game? Anything's possible. See, San Diego State's in a good position because they have the bye week this week, and then they host Nevada and New Mexico. So the chances are pretty good that San Diego State's going to end up 6-2. So right now, you would have to believe that Fresno State, as long as they don't lose 2 out of the next 3, will wind up winning the Western Division. And that's why this game against Hawaii is so important for Fresno, because if they lose that game, man, all bets are off. Now they're basically in a situation where they must win their last 2 games, and Wyoming is starting to play better football, and that game is at Wyoming. So there's a lot of possibilities there. But for Boise State, again, keep in mind, Wyoming is just a game back. They beat Wyoming a few weeks ago. Colorado State's the team that is a game and a half back. So if they beat Colorado State this week, then that's it. And it's going to be now. I don't want to get rid of Air Force either, because keep in mind, as BJ said, Air Force would be coming up next week, and Air Force has Wyoming this week at home. So if Air Force beats Wyoming at home and Boise State were to lose, then all of a sudden you've got a whole big mess of teams, Wyoming, Colorado State, and Air Force, which would all be one game behind Boise under that scenario, because Boise would have one loss, Wyoming, Colorado State, and Air Force would all have two losses. So that would be the situation. Or it could be a lot clearer if Boise State wins, takes care of Colorado State, and let's just say Wyoming takes care of Air Force. Then it's a two-team race. But then at that point, because Boise had beaten Wyoming, Boise would have to lose their last two, and then Wyoming would have to win their last two in order to win the division. So, look, that Boise State Air Force game could actually also be big for Air Force in their opportunity to win the division. Because if Air Force wins and Boise loses, as I mentioned, and then all of a sudden you've got that those three teams just a game back, the edge for Air Force is that Boise State, who has defeated San Diego State and defeated Wyoming, well, we're not worried about San Diego State, but they defeated Wyoming. If Air Force would actually go into Boise State and beat them, now Air Force and Colorado State would have themselves a tiebreaker edge over Boise. But looking at the Air Force situation, they beat Colorado State. So that puts Air Force in the driver's seat. So, I mean, if you've been able to follow all that, the fact is, from what we said at the very beginning, Boise's in the driver's seat. But if they lose this week, really it opens up a big can of worms that I just went through over the last couple of minutes. And again, it's a two-dog race in the Western Division. All right, so we want to thank BJ for joining us again. And we have these interviews, by the way, on demand. You can check them out at ourlads.com. Matter of fact, earlier today, we did an interview with Jerry Radcliffe talking Virginia football. So sorry about that, Boise State fans. But yeah, we were talking Virginia football a little bit earlier on. So that's available on demand. Tomorrow we've got our college football preview show. It's every Friday, 2 o'clock Eastern. We're going to have Hondo Carpenter from Michigan State football from Scout, talking about the big Michigan State game against Ohio State. And then Jeremy Clark from HornFrogBlitz.com, the big TCU Oklahoma game. So Hondo and Jeremy will be my guests tomorrow as we preview the college football weekend. Again, that's tomorrow on OFN College Football, 2 o'clock Eastern here on the Ourlads Football Radio Network. Follow us on Twitter at PrimeSN. And don't forget the Ourlads Football Radio Network, where it's never too early to think about the NFL Draft.